Live today on another episode of Christ Over Fear. I'm your host, Chad Jenkins. Excited for today's episode number 35 here on August 2nd, 2023. Beautiful Wednesday. We're on the cusp of about, 30 odd days or so before football season, before the greatest season upon us, which is always right on the cusp of fall football. So I know I'm excited. I can't wait. I can't wait to have our guest on today for a couple of reasons. But first and foremost, the reason I'm excited to have David on today is because who he is affiliated with, who he's the executive director for, and that is Crew Military. And the reason why Crew Military is so significant to me is because of what it did in my life, what one of the resources that Crew Military distributes did for me in my life at a critical time. And it was in 2017. I've talked about it. Any guests or, subscribers who listen to this show will know, because I talk about this quite a bit, but the Healing Combat Trauma Manual, and it's right here. I broke it out. It's the Combat Trauma Healing Manual, and it's distributed by Crew Military. And this book was given to me by a chaplain at the West Palm Beach VA Medical Center, and it was in the Healing Combat Trauma group. It was Chaplain Beasley, Anthony Beasley, as well as our psychologist. They were the two who organized that group and who led about 15 of us, men and women. It was predominantly men, but you had to be a combat veteran and you had to believe in Christ. Those were the two prerequisites of that class. And we got together every Wednesday from 2:30 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon at the VA in West Palm Beach. And we went through this manual. We went through it step by step. And simultaneously, as I was going through that manual, I was also doing cognitive processing therapy at the VA with a psychologist. And it wasn't, spiritually based or scripturally based like this manual is. This manual's grounded in the fundamentals of Christianity and the fundamentals of the Bible. And I was doing them step by step. And two things that popped out were, one, the therapy that I went through for cognitive processing therapy never once contradicted the Word of God. That's first and foremost. And two, this manual and going through what we went through, talking about where is Jesus in the most difficult circumstances in our life, where is Jesus and my specific combat traumas that I was going through, and I hadn't had that question posed to me during the cognitive processing therapy. But it wasn't until then that I could reflect and sit on, and the painful part of that experience, but also the complete and utter relief and sense of peace that I got by asking that question of where Jesus was and sitting on that, and then having to write it out. And you will do this in a late chapter in this book. I could get on for an entire episode about that experience, but I think it's one to talk about. So when I got asked if I would be interested in having the executive director of Crew Military, Brigadier General David Phillips, on this show, I was all about it. I'm super excited. I love seeing what they do. I get updates on what Crew Military is doing out in the field, actively for our active military service members throughout the globe, throughout the world. And it's just awesome. So I can't wait to hear about that and hear what David has to say on what that ministry is doing and touching the lives of those who need it. All of us need it, but desperately those individuals need it as well, because they're on the cusp of seeing and doing the hardest things this country asked them to do. And then just to give a quick background on David, he's 31 years of service in the Air Force as well as the Air National Guard. He lives in Yorktown, Virginia now. He's married to his better half of 32 years with 5 children and 3 grandchildren. He has his master's and his MBA and his bachelor's in business administration. And without further ado, let me go ahead and bring the general up on the screen. Sir, glad you could be here with us today.
Thank you, Chad. It's an honor to be here with you for sure.
Well, and I'd love to dive into just you. I sometimes open up with, "Hey, how'd you get into the military? What that goes, what that journey looked like?" And I think we'll get into that. But I'd really like to hear, I guess, first and foremost, how you got affiliated with Crew Military. I know it was around 2010 timeframe, and how you started there, and your progress to now being the executive director of Crew Military.
Well, thank you for that. My wife actually is a good journalist and she's a writer. And there's a local business newspaper here called the Oyster Pointer. And the owner of that asked her if she would go around and interview businesses and write an article about it and put it in this magazine so that then businesses around the community could learn about each other. So one that she got was the interview the executive director of Crew Military back at the time, and this was in 2010. So she went to do that, and in the course of the interview, the executive director asked, "Well, tell me a little bit about you and your family." So she did, and he says, "Oh, I think I'd like to meet your husband." So that took about a week, and I was there for a visit, met the executive director, got a tour, and he says, "I really think that we could use you in the ministry. What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I've been looking for something to do since I retired. I'd been doing a few consulting jobs. So long story short there, I started with Crew Military late in the year 2010. And have been in several capacities since then. That was in marketing and their resources, which included the Combat Trauma Healing Manual and the one that you've talked about. I became familiar with it then, and then started working with college campuses where they had ROTC programs, and then back in 2017, in January, began as the Ministry Advancement Team Director, which is responsible for the brand management, for all external communication and fundraising. Then back in November of last year, I was asked to step up and be the executive director. I'd thought about maybe I'd be retiring somewhere around 21, 22, but God had a different plan. So I said that would be exciting. I would like to do that. So I'm in about my 8th month now as serving as the executive director of this fantastic ministry. That is, I thought I served 31 years in the military. And now I get to continue serving with the military in bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to the men and women of the military, not only in the United States, but around the world. And it's just been an awesome journey, and I've enjoyed every day of it, every moment of it.
Well, I mean, that's great. And you're 8 months into the executive director role then, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, probably. Yeah, 8. I started in first part of November of last year, so about the 9th month, I guess.
And can you just give us a little bit of background of, I know you kind of gave the mission statement right there of sharing the gospel of Christ with the military service members, domestically and abroad. And I know that's kind of the big mission statement, but how do you go about that? I guess into the weeds, the tactical part of that. Can you just give us a little bit of a deep dive into Crew Military and how you all advance the gospel of Christ?
Sure. What we do is we introduce them to Christ, introduce them to the gospel. Those who accept Christ, we ground them in their faith, build them up a bit in their faith so that they can become a multiplying disciple. Because to us, our mission really and what we're all about is in Matthew chapter 28, the last few verses in 28, where Jesus says, "Go and make disciples of all nations." And that's what we want to do. So, like, what is a disciple? What does a disciple look like? Well, Jesus gave a good example because it was himself. He showed us how to be a disciple. So we work at recruit training bases. There are 9 of them in the United States, and we have ministry at 8 of them. And each week we partner with the chaplains that are at the locations for their Protestant service. We have what's called religious education that we're able to present the gospel to them. And of course, you have sort of a captive audience in the recruit world because what recruit wouldn't want to get away from their drill instructor for 2 hours every week? But it is volunteer. They can only come if they want to. They don't have to be there. But they come. So we have a class with them and introduce them to Jesus Christ, ground them in their faith, pointing them to becoming a multiplying disciple. We do that at all the recruit training bases. And at the operational bases, we have Bible studies. Again, we work with the chaplain. Bible studies with people. Sometimes we can do those off base. And what we're looking to do now is in our growth and expansion arena is at the follow-on training sites. Because when every recruit graduates from recruit training base, they all go to an advanced training course somewhere. So we want to increase our military there, because we can't grow too much with the recruit training. We pretty much maxed that out, but we want to take the next step and then go to the training. We are at the operational basis to introduce them, partner with them. We have some digital, some electronic platforms. We can keep up with an individual and be part of their life for their entire career, for the whole time that they're, and even if they get out of the military, we can still partner with them. And we find a lot of folks that volunteers to come and help us in ministry to do that.
Nice. Now, the recruitment training bases, I'm dating myself. Is that like a Fort Benning, a Fort Knox? I mean, are these where they're going to basic training? I would
Exactly.
imagine.
Yes. And
Okay.
there's 9 of them. And you mentioned Fort Knox. That's the one that we do not have ministry at yet, but we're pursuing that one so that we'll be at all 9 of those. We're currently we're 8 of the recruit training bases, and then 52 locations around the country, as well as 38 countries around the world.
How about that? Yeah, in Fort Knox. I mean, Kentucky, Bible Belt of the US. How are we not in there? I guess
Yeah,
their walls really are high, huh?
I need to do a site survey there for sure.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's awesome. And I love how using the chaplain corps to get in to help probably be an added asset, because they're outnumbered. I mean, it's one
Oh,
to how many they are trying to, minister to and everything else. And I would imagine, to your point, I mean, yes, you have the whole, hey, it's 2 hours on a Sunday. Do you want to go to church, or do you guys want to, stay in the barracks and shine shoes and get yelled at by a drill sergeant? The motivation is there, but what an opportunity that you all saw to advance the gospel of Christ, and especially through the Bible studies. I'd be interested in that, because I feel like when somebody, and maybe that's just my experience, but I think it's a lot of people's experience. When you finally start to dive into the Word of God, it's so attractive. You might hear these statements and these teachings, but hey, all we got to do is go to this. Once we go to the Bible and dig into that and really start educating ourselves and digging into the Word, that's an attractive thing that has to, because the Holy Spirit's working there. Is that what, have you found that the Bible studies are one of the bigger gateways to people accepting, or what have you found on that front?
Well, we found certainly right now with the Generation Z, that's who shows up at recruit training base. The 19, 20, 21-year-olds that shows up there, and some of the stories from that will bring tears to your eyes, both of sadness and of joy. Is we'll give them a Bible, and they'll say, we had a Bible at home. I grew up around a Bible, but I've never owned one before. This is a 20-year-old, never owned a Bible before. So we give them a Bible and say, okay, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6, verse 13. And they just look at you. What does that mean? They don't know what that means.
Right.
So we find they're hungry at the recruit training bases. They're hungry for the gospel. Now, to your question, we get to the Bible studies that's, at an operational base where somebody's been in 4, 5, 10, 20 years, and we have a Bible study. And that's where we run across people that, like your experience, we run across people that say, I've been in combat 2 or 3 times, and I just don't understand what's going on with me. And we say, okay, here's people that life has affected them and they have needs. We'll run across couples that have relational issues. They're struggling with couples and young families or families even with adult children, that will say, there might be some issues here that you have. We have people that we partner with. And that's where, your experience comes into where combat trauma is an awful thing, and it can bring post-traumatic stress to an individual, and that's something that can be solved. This is not something that you're stuck with for the rest of your life, because we know the real healing power is the power of the Lord Jesus Christ. We know that's what the healing power is, but people have to get on a journey and get their individual experiences and be able to talk through those. So it's in the operational base ministry through the Bible studies that we also find people hungry for Christ and need salvation. But what they also say, I have this problem in my life. Is there any way that you can help us with that? And we find those who we're able to help people through our ministry. Our people that are, many of them have experienced those same kind of things. Is yes, I can walk with you on this, and we give them
Mhm.
some resources, like you've mentioned, to help them through that, knowing that the real healing power is coming from the Holy Spirit, coming from the Lord. So we find that in both the operational basis as well as a recruit. We don't find too many recruits with PTS, although they would say, my experience with my drill instructor was horrendous, but then it's later when they're 5, 6, 8 years into their career in the military that they've experienced these things. And we find too, those who have had a good base in the gospel, those who may have gotten saved at recruit training base, when they
Mhm.
run across those experiences, they know the Bible is the source of the power, and the Lord Jesus is the source of the power for healing, and to give them the strength that they need as they move forward. So we definitely find that in our Bible studies at the operational basis. And interestingly enough, we also have found that in the last 5 or 6 years, and begun ministry at recruit training bases with the drill instructors. Uh,
Mm.
because at one of the installations that is kind of a flagship of our recruit training ministry, a few years ago, the divorce rate among drill instructors was 90%.
Mm.
And they're in that job for 2, maybe 3 years, and it's grueling. It's difficult for them. And the drill instructor needs Jesus just as much as the recruit does. Doesn't
Mhm.
change their job, doesn't change the behavior of what they do, but it equips them with that. And so at a few of those installations where we've had that, we've focused our staff on the drill instructors. So when the recruits go to church for 2 hours, we have folks that sit down with the drill instructors
Mm.
and minister to them. Give them a soft drink and some snacks, and sit down and say, "Hey, look, tell me what's going on with you. What's going on in your life?" And that has been extremely beneficial to the drill instructors as well as the recruits that we're helping them at the same time. So it's a door that God opened, and it was amazing.
Well, that's a great one I mean, to your point, everyone needs Jesus, right? It's not just
Amen.
the recruit, it's not just, the drill instructor, it's our friendlies and our foes. We all need them.
Amen.
Um, and, you know, have you gotten any feedback? It might not be long enough, but have you gotten any feedback? Like, has the divorce rate, decreased at all amongst them, or you don't know yet, maybe,
It,
probably on the
yeah,
percentage?
I don't have statistics, but to answer your question, yes.
Mhm.
There have been a number of marriages that have been saved. There are those that were, they had the divorce papers in front of them, and they were going to go meet with the attorney and have them, sign it. They would be done. And we talked to the drill instructor on Sunday during 2 hours, and said, "Hey, can we meet with you and your wife, one evening this week when you have some time that we might could talk?" And have gone through that and introduced them to Jesus Christ. Most of our folks are not trained professional counselors, but if you need
Mhm.
that, we can connect you with that. But
Mhm.
sharing the gospel with them and seeing that life change in them, to say, okay, we're going to give this another shot, but this time we're going to do it Jesus's way. We're going to do it the way that He wants us to do it. And we have seen marriages get healed and turned around, and it's been an amazing thing to be able to see a drill instructor who 2 weeks ago was not a believer, getting ready to go get a divorce. They put that on pause, and now they're working through understanding each other. And then we find too that drill instructor may have had some PTS
Right.
issues they were dealing with, and they needed to get that straight. And that was
Mhm.
as much of an issue as working a 60-hour week with recruits,
Right.
as it is the time was with the trauma that they may have suffered through.
Mhm. Well, and, that's what I loved about Chaplain Beasley at the West Palm Beach, VA Medical Center is his commitment to the gospel, really, his commitment to Christ to bring this in, and, with our psychologist as well, because the 2 of them were so powerful It was the only VA to my knowledge in the country that was offering that, and
Hmm.
like that group setting, and they were doing it within the PTSD clinic. It wasn't like just the chaplain's office. They were doing it within the PTSD clinic, and it was an offered additional class for like an additional resource. And that was my biggest thing is the VA needed to open this avenue to every VA facility in the country to have that booklet and have a chaplain and a psychologist be in there together and do that. That formula was such a powerful formula. And what I can tell you, David, is going through that book and with the individuals in that room, mostly Vietnam veterans.
Hmm.
And then there was me and one other kind of global war on terrorism, OEF veteran. We're the younger ones. Um, but you talk about seeing Christ show up in that room. You talk about seeing the hands and feet of Christ and seeing the healing power of him, but also like the pain that will come from men who are willing to lay their guard down and willing to share their hearts. I mean, the shared collective pain, but the shared collective joy in that room was second to none. So I think what you're doing in all those different ministries, grabbing them early, grabbing them if they're a drill sergeant, grabbing them at the operational level, because a lot of times I don't have the statistic, but even the young guys and gals coming in, not that I mean, there is a little bit of there can be individuals who are running from something,
Hmm.
to join the military at a young age, whether it's childhood trauma. I mean, there's a lot of childhood trauma that can then dovetail into the combat trauma years later. So I think it's prevalent to reach them wherever they're at and whatever stage
Yes.
they're at. And it sounds like that's what you all have done at Crew Military.
Right. And that was the example that Jesus gave us. He met people where they were.
Right.
And then you assess, you get to know somebody because it's always relationship. The
Hmm.
relationship that we have with the individuals, or if it's a couple, the relationship that we establish with them, and introducing them to Jesus Christ so that they get a relationship with Him. And that's where the source is, that's where the healing power is. And to meet them. And then it's so blessed when we have somebody, and there's two or three, probably more than a half a dozen of folks that are military members and families that are getting ready to retire from the military, and they're looking to say, we'd like to come on board and work full time with you folks and be a part of what you're doing.
Hmm.
And I look, although I had a space of about 5 or 6 years in between, I'm looking at serving with the military and then getting into crew military to serve right back with the military again. Sharing the gospel of Christ is so amazing. It's awesome.
Now let's dovetail back a couple years prior. So
Okay.
let's go to young David before the Brigadier General, before the stars were put on the lapel. Let's go back to you and your journey and how you got into the military, how you pursued that, and what your relationship with Christ was, whether it was before that, after that, during that, all in between. Can you just kind of share what drew you to the military and what your walk with Christ was during that time frame?
Yes, I was introduced to Jesus Christ when I was 8 years old, and through my mother,
Hmm.
because she would always take me to church, and I would. She sang in the choir, so I always sat on the front row, for the front pew on the front bench, and I can tell you that mothers can really get your attention with a look. If I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, I'd catch an eye with her who was sitting up in the choir, and she could look at me, and I knew that my days were numbered if I didn't straighten up. My salvation experience came through my mother, who I asked her the question one day riding home from church. I said, we had this thing called communion, and they give crackers and juice, and I'm not supposed to do that, and I just pass it on. What is that for, and why can't I do it?
Hmm.
So she shared the gospel with me. My father was an Army veteran of World War II. He was military police, spent some time in Germany, and actually, by a fluke in orders, he attended General George Patton's funeral over in Heidelberg. But when I was growing up, he was in the Army Reserves. So I would see him on Monday mornings leave to go to work with his Army uniform on a hanger and going out with him. And he'd come back Monday evening about 8 or 9 o'clock in uniform, And so I was introduced to the military just by seeing him in uniform just about every week. And he would share about what he did in the military. And he said, he told me, he said, son, of course, the draft was going on then. He said, you're going to need to serve your country and serve in the military. And he says, from my experience, I would tell you not to join the Army. He says, so join either the Navy or the Air Force. And he says, for goodness sakes, what you do, don't join the Marines. So okay. So as it turned out, I did attend 2 years of Army ROTC in my undergraduate college. And then in my junior year, I joined the Air National Guard because I liked airplanes. But my eyesight was such that at that time, I didn't have the vision to be able to go to pilot training. So I said, I'd like to do the Air Force. So I said, I can do this and I can join the Air Guard. So I got into the Air Guard here in Virginia and served with them, was in logistics as enlisted. So my first 12 years of 31 years was enlisted. And then I had finished my college and decided, well, I think I want to go into the officer corps because I couldn't find the next grade slot up, or I was an E5. I couldn't find an E6 slot. So I said, I think I want to go to OTS. So I found there was a slot. I applied for it, went to it, graduated from OTS. And about 2 years later, the Air Force says, we need to have some more logistics officers. So I raised my hand and says, I'll volunteer for that. So I went full time with the Air Force. And then when they learned that I knew how to communicate with Air National Guard units, they said, how about you be a liaison with Air Guard units that are gained? Because certainly back at that time, this was during the Gulf War era, much of the airframes for the Air Force was in the Air Guard and in the reserves, the Air Force reserves. So it said, we're trying to connect with them. And we're just not getting anywhere. They're difficult to work with. We try to bring in the hammer and say, we are the Air Force and you're the Air Guard. So I said, well, let's do it this way. And I assure you it's going to work a little better. So I was able to make sure that how they access the Air National Guard and to some extent the Air Force Reserves was accomplished in a proper way, and just so enjoyed that and got really involved. I got into combat planning in the combat logistics cells during the Gulf War, both Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and it was awesome to just be a part of that. Never actually went to the Gulf in person, but I sent a lot of equipment, a lot of supplies, a lot of hardware over there, and really enjoyed that. And when I was promoted to Brigadier General, they said, okay, you're next. And I was at Langley Air Force Base, which is the headquarters for Air Combat Command. And they said, okay, your next assignment needs to be at the Pentagon. And I was 31 years of service at that time. And I said, to go to the Pentagon as a 1-star means you make coffee and you go get donuts. So I said, I'm not real sure about that. So I decided to retire. So I retired at that point after 31 years. I thought that was good. God was calling me to do something else. And within a few short years, he introduced me to military ministry. And it was like, this is a perfect fit. This is excellent. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I came up where I was. And I attribute me having that patriotic strain that you're going to serve in the military, kind of like, do you want to get away from your drill instructor for 2 hours? So let's go to church. Let me pick the force I want to be in before I get drafted into the Army.
Right.
But it was a great career. I enjoyed it. I never, the only thing I didn't like about retirement was not being able to connect with the people that I had been connecting with. I enjoyed every day of my 31 years with the military. And sometimes it's, you don't enjoy what you have to do on a particular day or a particular week. But I've always enjoyed the people, always being around people and making sure we get the mission done. And our mission today, and for this great organization, Crew Military, our mission is to get the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our founder, Colonel Jack Fain, who was both in the Army Air Corps and then later in the Air Force, because he served in the 40s and 50s. And he got with Bill Bright, who was the founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, and said, there needs
Mhm.
to be a military organization. We need to minister to the military. And he had a heart for the military. And they said, they both agreed, and he established military ministry that we now call Crew Military. Actually, we use the terms interchangeably in 1965. So we're in our 58th year of service to the military. And what Colonel Fain said was, and I'm going to read it to you, I've got it here in front of me. A man or woman in uniform bearing arms and subject to enemy action deserves first priority to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that is something we still believe today. We still make sure that happens. They need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then beyond that, to produce multiplying disciples. We want the military, because in the military, you win them to Jesus Christ. And then you train them and to where they can become a multiplying disciple, as Christ directed us, commanded us, told us to do. Then they go all over the world to serve their country, and all over like the U.S. They go all over the United States and then around the world and serve the U.S. military. But they also take Christ with them. And so when they interact with the people that they're interacting with and the people that they serve with, they have the capability to share the gospel with others. And that's what we believe Christ meant by a multiplying disciple, is you share your faith with others. And that's our mission. That's our goal.
Well, and I love everything you just shared. So thanks for giving us the rundown all the way through. And then I think to your point on a multiplying disciple, it also becomes prevalent that they're a good communicator of the gospel, and a good communicator of in life as well, just in circumstances, active listening, and all of that. And one of your stories, it sounds like, I know that you already are just by hearing you today, but I'm curious. It sounds like you had to use some communication skills on the Air Guard versus the Air Force when you said, hey, the Air Force was saying can you dive into that story a little bit more on what you brought to the table to be able to get those two to align? And sound like the Air Guard was a little bit not wanting to be 800-pound gorillaed by the Air Force.
Very true. And there were lots of them. I will just one that comes to mind. I was an 06 at the time, a colonel. I'm sitting at a table and the two-star logistics director for the Air Force, and I'm sitting there as the lone Air Guard person or familiar with the Air Guard. And I was saying, well, the Air Guard wants training, wants equipment. They need upgrades for the equipment that they have. And the active duty or the Air Force colonel sitting around the table said, well, that's resources, that's funding that we need for the Air Force. And I said, well, understand the Air Guard and the Air Force, they're part of the Air Force, and they're there to serve you. Yeah, they have a state mission. And one of them said, well, yeah, but you got to activate them. And I said, no, that is a way that you can do it, but you don't have to activate them to get the Air Guard folks. And they said, well, how do you do that? I said, ask for volunteers. Well, nobody's going to volunteer to serve with us. I said, do you know that 63%, and this is a dated number, but at the time, I said, do you know 63% of all of the aviators that are in the Air National Guard are prior service, active duty? And I said, so when you're asking for volunteers, you're asking for people who served with you on active duty, because it's 63% of them. They got out because they got a job offer of some kind, but they wanted to continue to serve, so they joined the Air Guard. And I said, another thing that, do you have all the money that you want from Congress to be able to fund what you need? Well, of course we don't. We don't have enough. And you're asking to give some of that over to the Air Guard. And I said, have you ever heard of the National Guard of the United States, NGUS, that's called NAUGUS? I said, have you ever heard of that? Yeah, we've heard of that. And I said, the advocates for NAUGUS are the Air Guard units. And I said, so what you need to do is sit down with the Guard folks and tell them what you need, because they will call their congressman and tell them this is what we need. I said, so let's devise a plan of what we need for both of us. And then the NAUGUS is the largest lobbying organization in the military with Congress. And I says, and that's a valid reason. It's not pork. It's not any extra fluff. And I said, if you work together, you'll find that the Air Guard is standing there ready if you'll just help equip them with what they need, because they want to bring to the fight that which we need to have to win. And they said, okay, how do we do that? So I said, okay, let me get some folks from around the country in the Air Guard coming here and let's devise that. So we did that. And they said, okay, Desert Shield came up and they said, we need some tanker drivers. We need tankers, the KC-135s, and we need C-130s. We need F-16s, F-15s, and we need help in getting all the airframes into Desert Shield that we need. And we don't have enough ready force right now. But it's going to take literally an act of Congress to mobilize the units, and that becomes a very big political question. And I said, okay, how much do you need? Make a list of what you need. Airframes, people, pilots, maintainers, logisticians, tell me what you need. We put it out to the Air Guards and say, anybody who wishes to volunteer for this service for 6 to 12 months, the Air Force will bring you on active duty. They will pay you. And all we need you to do, you're qualified, volunteer for it. And they said, you're not going to get anybody. When we asked for 100 volunteers, we got 175 volunteers. Yeah. Wow. If we asked for 3 squadrons, we got 6 squadrons that volunteered. And I said, all you have to do is tell the folks what you need and then provide them what they need to provide you what you need. And that was, I remember the 2-star that told me, he says, I have never seen any action like this where people who all they wanted to do was get in a room and fight with each other, that in just a few minutes and a couple of meetings, he said, I could walk in and see these people talking to each other and actually going to lunch with each other because they were helping each other. What do you bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? And let's work together. We were trying to do something at the time at the headquarters to have some Air Guard folks to be part of the staff that's there. I mean, permanently assigned there as part of the staff. It took us about 12 years to do that. But as an example, there are several in Langley, 15 minutes from where I'm sitting. Langley Air Force Base has an Air Guard staff. There's actually a squadron of Air National Guard F-22s that fly out of Langley, and they train and fly every day together. And it's just, it's turned out to be amazing. We are truly one force. The Air Guard keeps the identity as an Air Guard. But, activation, the Air Force has learned activation simply means, hey, I need this. Who wants to volunteer to help me do it? And they've never had a shortage of volunteers. There's always, in the Guard, they like to call them guard bums. They said, okay, you'll take a 6-month active duty tour, then you might be off active duty for a month or two, then you're back on doing something else. But it really became a total force. And the effort and the time that you put in to do that, it was so wonderful to see that and see the fact that here's 2 organizations that kind of fussed with each other that are now working together for the good and for the betterment of this nation to make sure that we have the forces that we need.
Sounds like Brigadier General retired David Phillips needs to take that formula to Congress.
I'm ready.
There you go. Well, I tell you what, it's been a pleasure to have you on today, David. I love being able to hear just all your stories, what you're doing with Crew Military, your leadership there, where you're taking it, what the ultimate mission is of the organization, and then as well as your story in Christ through all the years of service that you've given to this country. So thank you for that. And then before we close up, I would like to ask, just for anybody out there, how do they get a hold of Crew Military? How do they use it as a resource, or how do they just reach out if they want to help? Just that contact information of the best way to get a hold of Crew Military if they're out there, an active listener, and want to participate in the cause of Crew Military.
Well, certainly the quickest and best way for anybody is through our website, and that's crewmilitary.org. You just come into us, and then you want to learn more about the ministry. You want to talk to somebody about becoming a volunteer. or if you have a need that you believe Crew Military can meet for you. We want to hear about that. That's a way. If you're active duty or serving on a military installation, go to your chaplain and say, do you have Crew Military here on the base? I want to talk to somebody with Crew Military. And we're not at all. So some of them are going to say, no, I don't. But then that gets the chaplain maybe asking a few questions about who's Crew Military. But I would say the quickest way is go to our website, www.crewmilitary.org, and let us know how we can serve you. And it's a fairly intuitive website. You can get to it. And we want to reach out to you and help anybody in any way that we can.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing your story and also being a guest today on Christ Over Fear. I know it's been a long in the making that I've wanted to have Crew Military and just give the adequate coverage of Crew Military because it changed my life. I'm forever grateful for the ministry. So thanks for coming on and being a guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was my pleasure. It's my honor to do that. And thank you, Chad, for all that you do for Crew Military and have over the years. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will see you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good one, David. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that was episode 35 today of Christ Over Fear with Brigadier General David Phillips, the Executive Director of Crew Military. Got to hear his story on running Crew Military from 2010 when he first was talking to the Executive Director there to now, lo and behold, 13 years later, and he's the Executive Director of Crew Military. And then as well as the mother of him, his mom, getting him to learn about Christ early in his walk with Christ at 8 years old. That's always such a prevalence. So for moms and dads out there, it's never too young to share the gospel of Christ with our youth, with our kids, to build that bedrock of foundation for them for a lifetime. I know they will be forever grateful, and just continue to fight the good fight. And until next time, enjoy this episode of episode 35. Before I let you go, just know that it will be hung on all your podcast platforms later this afternoon. So be sure to check it out. All right. Until next time, continue to fight the good fight. Thanks. Bye.